The steady beeping of hospital monitors counted out the seconds as I drifted in and out of consciousness. The white ceiling tiles above me blurred as tears welled in my eyes. Not from the pain of my recent emergency surgery. The medication had dulled that to a manageable throb. No, these tears came from betrayal. While I had been fighting for my life in the operating room, my mother-in-law Eleanor had somehow convinced my husband Daniel to grant her access to our bank accounts. In less than 48 hours, she had systematically emptied our joint savings, our vacation fund, and even the business account I used for my interior design studio. $213,000 gone. Just like that. What Eleanor didn't know, what neither she nor Daniel knew, was that I owned the apartment building where she had been living for the past 2 years. The very roof over her scheming head belonged to me. The monthly rent check she faithfully sent to a property management company ultimately landed in my separate private account, an account she knew nothing about. The irony might have made me laugh if I wasn't so devastated by my husband's betrayal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The setup. Perfect lives aren't always what they seem. 3 days earlier, I had been rushing to finalize designs for the Henderson project, my biggest client to date. The renovation of their historic downtown building could put Mitchell Design Studio on the map. I remembered feeling a twinge in my side as I leaned over my drawing table, but I dismissed it as stress, or perhaps the result of skipping lunch, again. By evening, the pain had become unbearable. Daniel found me curled on the bathroom floor, barely able to speak. His face had gone pale with worry as he called 911. "Stay with me, Sarah," he kept saying as we waited for the ambulance. In that moment, I believed he cared. The diagnosis came quickly. Acute appendicitis with complications. My appendix had ruptured, requiring emergency surgery and several days of hospitalization to manage the infection that had already begun spreading through my abdomen. "You're lucky your husband brought you in when he did," Dr. Patel told me after the surgery. A few more hours could have been much worse. Daniel had been attentive that first day, sitting by my bedside, holding my hand, assuring me that everything would be all right. "Don't worry about anything but getting better," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "I'll take care of everything." I believed him. After 7 years of marriage, why wouldn't I? The next morning, he arrived with a cup of my favorite tea and a distracted manner. "I have to go into the office," he explained, checking his watch. "Big presentation today. Can't reschedule." "Of course," I said, understanding the demands of his marketing executive position. "The Henderson files are on my laptop if Megan needs them." "I'll tell her," he promised, already heading toward the door. "Oh, and Mom's coming by later. She wants to help." I tried not to let my expression change. Eleanor Mitchell had never approved of me. In her eyes, I would never be good enough for her precious son. Too independent, too career-focused, not from the right kind of family. She masked her disdain with thin smiles and backhanded compliments. Daniel never seemed to notice, or chose not to. "That's nice of her," I managed. Daniel left, and I drifted back to sleep. When I woke again, Eleanor was sitting primly in the visitor's chair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression one of practiced concern. "Sarah, dear," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. "Daniel asked me to check on you. He's so worried, poor thing." "I'm doing better," I said, reaching for the water cup on my bedside table. Eleanor made no move to help. "Daniel says you'll be here for several more days," she continued. "He mentioned you might be concerned about your business accounts and bill payments while you're indisposed." Something in her tone made me uneasy. "Megan can handle the studio," I said carefully, "and most of our personal bills are on autopay." Eleanor nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Daniel thought it might be best if I help manage things until you're back on your feet, just to make sure nothing falls through the cracks." Alarm bells rang in my head, but the medication made my thoughts fuzzy. "That's really not necessary, Eleanor." "Nonsense," she replied, patting my hand with cool fingers. "Family helps family. Daniel has already added me to your account so I can make sure everything runs smoothly." The monitors beside me beeped faster as my heart rate spiked. "He did." "What?" "Don't excite yourself, dear. It's all taken care of." She stood, smoothing her expensive slacks. "I should let you rest. Doctor's orders." After she left, I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I opened our banking app. The screen confirmed my worst fears. Our main checking account, which should have held our monthly budget of around $8,000, showed a balance of $212.47. I frantically tapped to our savings account, where we kept an emergency fund and our vacation savings. The balance, $176.33. Most devastating was my business account, which had contained nearly $70,000 earmarked for materials for the Henderson project. Current balance, $1,025.14. My head spun as I tried to understand what was happening. I called Daniel, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Why is Eleanor on our accounts? Where is our money?" No response. I called Megan, my voice breaking as I explained the situation. "That witch," Megan said, her usual diplomacy abandoned. "Sarah, something's not right. Daniel stopped by the studio this morning and collected all the client files and your laptop, said you asked him to bring them to you at the hospital." My blood ran cold. "I didn't." "I know that now." Megan's voice hardened. "I'm coming to see you. And I'm bringing my brother Jason with me." "The attorney?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "Yes. Don't do anything or sign anything until we get there. And Sarah? We'll figure this out." After we hung up, I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what was happening. Daniel and I had always maintained relatively separate professional lives, but our personal finances were intertwined. He managed most of our joint accounts since his background in business made him more comfortable with financial matters. I handled my business separately, though Daniel had insisted on being added to those accounts, just in case. Eleanor had never shown interest in our financial arrangements before. Why now? And why would Daniel give her access? The pieces weren't fitting together, but a picture was emerging that I didn't want to see. A nurse came in to check my vitals, frowning at the monitor. "Your blood pressure is elevated, Mrs. Mitchell. Are you in pain?" "Not physical pain," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. She adjusted my IV, her expression sympathetic. "Try to rest. Your body needs all its energy for healing." But rest was impossible. My mind raced with questions, scenarios, fears. I tried Daniel's phone again, straight to voicemail. I texted Eleanor, "Please call me about the accounts. Urgent." No response. I opened my email, hoping for some explanation, some trail of what was happening. There, in my inbox, were notifications from our bank. Alert. Large transfer from account ending in 4732. Multiple alerts, multiple transfers, all from yesterday and today, all after my surgery. While I had been unconscious, fighting infection, someone had been systematically draining our accounts. The realization brought a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my medical condition. Had my mother-in-law stolen from me while I lay in a hospital bed? Had my husband helped her do it? I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of anger and betrayal. Then I remembered something that neither Daniel nor Eleanor knew about. My grandmother had been a practical, independent woman who believed every woman should have her own resources, separate from her husband. Men come and go, Sarah, she'd told me when I was just 22, but financial independence is forever. When she passed away 5 years ago, she left me a small apartment building in Oakwood Valley, the Parkview Apartments, a modest but well-maintained property with 8 units. I'd kept the same property management company, and the income went into a separate account at a different bank than the one Daniel and I used. It wasn't a fortune, but over the years, that account had grown to just over $300,000. I rarely touched it, seeing it as my personal safety net, just as Grandma had intended. What neither Daniel nor Eleanor knew was that 2 years ago, Eleanor had moved into Unit 7 at the Parkview. She'd found the place through a rental agency, never realizing that the S. Mitchell listed as the property owner on her lease was her daughter-in-law. The property management company handled everything, and I'd never had reason to mention my ownership to Daniel or his mother. Eleanor Mitchell had been faithfully paying rent to me for 2 years without knowing it. The irony gave me a small measure of comfort as I lay in the hospital bed, trying to understand how my life had imploded in the span of a day. I still had resources they knew nothing about. I wasn't destitute, but I was betrayed, and I needed to understand why. Megan arrived, an hour later with her brother Jason. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A sharp-eyed family law attorney, whose usual calm demeanor was edged with concern when he saw me. "Sarah," he said, taking the chair beside my bed while Megan perched on the edge of the mattress, squeezing my hand. "Megan has told me a little about what's happening. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning." I explained about Eleanor's visit, the drained accounts, Daniel's silence, and the missing business files. Jason took notes, his expression darkening. "Have you been able to verify all the transfers? Do you know where the money went?" "No," I admitted. "I can see that transfers were made, but not the destination accounts." He nodded. "We need to act quickly. I'd like your permission to contact the bank on your behalf and initiate fraud claims." "Fraud?" The word stuck in my throat. "But if Daniel authorized it? If your husband gave his mother access to your accounts without your knowledge, or consent, especially your business account, that's problematic from a legal standpoint." Jason explained gently. "At minimum, we need to freeze any remaining funds and trace where the money went." I closed my eyes, the reality of what was happening settling over me like a heavy weight. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't Eleanor overstepping boundaries. This was deliberate. "Do it," I said, opening my eyes with new resolve. "And Jason, there's something else you should know." I told them about the Parkview Apartments, my separate account, and the ironic fact that Eleanor had been my tenant for years without knowing it. Megan's eyes widened. "Oh my God, Sarah, that's potentially very helpful," Jason finished, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "It gives us leverage and resources to work with." He stood, straightening his tie. "I'm going to make some calls. Megan will stay with you. Don't contact Daniel or Eleanor yet. Let's get some legal protections in place first." After Jason stepped out, Megan moved closer, her face etched with concern and anger on my behalf. "I always knew that woman was toxic, but this... Sarah, I'm so sorry." "I still don't understand why," I said, the question that had been haunting me. "Why now? Why like this?" Megan hesitated. "I don't know if this is related, but there have been rumors at Daniel's company. Layoffs coming, possibly financial problems. Martin in accounting mentioned something about an audit." The pieces started shifting, forming a different picture. Daniel worked in marketing, but he also handled some of the company's client financial accounts. If there were irregularities, if he was somehow involved. "You think he's in trouble?" I said slowly. "And he's... what? Running away? Taking the money and running?" "I don't know," Megan admitted. But the timing is suspicious, isn't it? You're hospitalized, unable to monitor accounts, and suddenly everything's gone. The thought made me physically ill. Had my medical emergency simply provided a convenient opportunity? Or worse, had he been planning this, waiting for the right moment? A memory surfaced. Daniel 3 weeks ago asking casual questions about my grandmother's property. Did she leave you anything else besides those old photo albums? Family jewelry, maybe a little nest egg? I'd been distracted, working on the Henderson designs, and had given a vague answer about some small investments. Had he been fishing for information? The nurse returned, checking the monitors with a concerned expression. Mrs. Mitchell, you need to try to stay calm. Your heart rate and blood pressure are concerning. Should I ask your visitors to step out? No, I said quickly. They're helping me. I'm okay. She didn't look convinced but nodded. I'll bring you something mild for anxiety. Dr. Patel would want you resting, not stressed. After she left, Megan lowered her voice. Sarah, whatever's happening, we'll figure it out. But right now, you need to focus on getting well. The infection from your ruptured appendix is serious. You can't fight that and this betrayal at the same time. She was right, of course. My body needed rest to heal. But my mind wouldn't stop racing, piecing together clues I had missed. Daniel's recent late nights at the office, his insistence on handling all our finances, the way he'd discouraged me from joining his company events the past few months. Eleanor's increased presence in our lives, her sudden interest in our financial arrangements. Had they been planning this together? Mother and son conspiring while I focused on growing my business? Jason returned, his expression hard to read. I've started the process with the bank, he said. They've flagged the accounts and are initiating their fraud investigation protocols. I've also filed an emergency petition for financial separation, given the circumstances. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means that legally, from this point forward, Daniel cannot access any new accounts you open or assets you acquire. It also creates a record of the date you discovered financial malfeasance, which will be important for the divorce proceedings. Divorce? The word hung in the air between us. Was that where this was headed? The end of my 7-year marriage? We don't know everything yet, Jason cautioned, seeing my expression. But we need to protect you legally while we figure it out. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. There's something else, he continued. The bank confirmed that the transfers were made to an account at First National in Eleanor's name only. The account was opened just 1 week ago. 1 week ago. While I was busy preparing for the Henderson presentation, my mother-in-law had been opening an account to receive my money. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. The bank is cooperating with the fraud investigation, Jason continued. But recovery of funds might be complicated if Eleanor has already moved the money elsewhere. She's not that sophisticated with finances, I said, remembering how Eleanor still wrote checks at the grocery store and refused to use online banking. She must be working with someone. Daniel, Megan said flatly. Probably. But I needed proof, needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. What about my apartment building? Could they somehow access that? Not without documentation proving ownership, Jason assured me. And since it's held in your name only, at a different bank, with a separate property management company, it would be difficult for them to even know about it, let alone access it. A small comfort. At least I still had that. The nurse returned with a small pill, which I took gratefully. As the mild sedative began to take effect, I felt the sharp edges of my anxiety soften slightly. You should rest, Megan said, gathering her purse. I'll go by your house, pick up some clothes and your personal tablet. Anything else you need? I thought about my home, wondering if it would feel different now, tainted by betrayal. In my desk drawer, there's a blue folder with my grandmother's will and the property documents. Bring those, please. Megan nodded. I'll be back in a few hours. Try to sleep. After they left, I drifted in and out of consciousness, the medication blurring the edges of my thoughts. But even in that hazy state, a clarity was emerging. Whatever was happening, whatever Daniel and Eleanor were doing, I would not be their victim. I might be physically weakened, confined to this hospital bed, but I was not powerless. My mother-in-law had emptied my bank accounts during my hospital stay. She had no idea I was her landlord, but she was about to find out exactly who she was dealing with. The sedative finally pulled me under into a dreamless sleep, my body surrendering to the healing process it desperately needed. The last coherent thought I had was of my grandmother's words, spoken so many years ago but now carrying new significance. Financial independence is forever, Sarah. Never forget that. I woke to the sound of hushed voices, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lighting. I found Megan sitting beside Dr. Patel near the foot of my bed. Their serious expressions sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. Sarah, Dr. Patel said, noticing I was awake. How are you feeling? Physically, the pain had subsided to a dull throb. Emotionally, I felt like I'd been hollowed out. Better, I think. What time is it? Almost 7 in the evening, Megan answered, moving closer to take my hand. You've been asleep for a few hours. Dr. Patel checked my vitals, her expression professional but concerned. Your fever has improved, which is good news. The antibiotics are working. However, your blood pressure is still elevated. I wonder why, I said with a bitter laugh that made my surgical incision ache. Dr. Patel's gaze softened. Your friend has explained some of what you're dealing with. Medical issues are rarely just physical. Emotional stress can significantly impact recovery. She made a note in my chart. I'm prescribing something mild for anxiety, not to diminish what you're feeling. Those feelings are valid, but to help your body focus its energy on healing. I nodded, grateful for her understanding. Also, she continued, I've updated your visitor restrictions. Only those on your approved list will be allowed in. Hospital security has been notified. The implication was clear. Daniel and Eleanor weren't welcome. Thank you, I whispered. After Dr. Patel left, Megan pulled her chair closer. I went to your house, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Sarah, things are worse than we thought. My stomach clenched. Tell me. The house was different. There were boxes everywhere, some things missing. It looked like someone was packing up. Packing? What was missing? Your design. Awards are gone from the shelves. The painting from your honeymoon in Tuscany. The vintage desk your grandmother gave you. She hesitated. And when I went to your home office for the blue folder, I found this instead. She handed me a printed email. It was from Daniel to someone named Vincent Hoffman at First Capital Investments, dated 2 weeks ago. Transfer of property sale proceeds complete, it read. Closing on the Florida condo next week as discussed. Eleanor's retirement plans are in motion. Florida condo? Eleanor's retirement? I don't understand, I said, though a terrible suspicion was forming. Property sale proceeds? We haven't sold any property. Megan's eyes filled with sympathy. Jason is looking into it. But Sarah, I think they might have been planning this for a while. The blue folder with your grandmother's documents? It wasn't there. And when I checked your home safe, you know the combination. You gave it to me last year during the Watson project, remember? In case you needed me to retrieve contracts while you were at that conference. She took a deep breath. The safe was empty. All your important documents, your passport, birth certificate, everything's gone. The room seemed to tilt around me. This wasn't just opportunistic theft during my medical emergency. This was methodical, planned, deliberate. Did you see any sign of Daniel? Megan shook her head. No. But there was a suitcase in your bedroom, half packed with his clothes. And Sarah? The garage door was open. His car wasn't there, but neither was yours. My silver Audi, purchased just last year. Another asset I might never see again. He's running, I whispered, the reality sinking in. They both are. Megan squeezed my hand. Jason is on his way back. He's been making calls all afternoon. As if summoned by his name, Jason appeared in the doorway, his normally immaculate suit looking wrinkled, his expression grim but determined. "What have you found?" I asked, bracing myself. He sat down heavily, opening his laptop. "Let's start with the banking situation. The good news is we've initiated the fraud investigation and frozen what's left in your accounts. The bad news is most of the money is already gone." Gone where? Multiple transfers to Eleanor's new account, which was then almost immediately emptied through a series of withdrawals and transfers to other accounts we're still tracing. Some money was wired to a bank in Tampa, Florida. "The Florida condo," Megan said. Jason nodded. "Exactly. And that brings us to the property issue." He pulled up a document on his laptop, turning it so I could see. This was filed with the county recorder's office 2 months ago. It was a property deed transfer for the Parkview Apartments, showing the owner as S&D Mitchell Holdings, LLC. "I never created any LLC," I said, my voice rising. "That's not real." "No, it's not," Jason confirmed. "But someone created it, using both your names and then transferred the property into its ownership. From there, the LLC sold the property 3 weeks ago to Bayview Development Group for $1. $8 million. The room spun around me. My apartment building, my grandmother's legacy, sold without my knowledge? How is that even possible? I gasped. "I never signed anything." Jason's expression hardened. "Your signature is on the documents. Based on comparing it to your known signatures, it appears to be forged." Forged. The word echoed in my mind, each repetition adding to my growing fury. Daniel had forged my signature to steal my inheritance. "The funds from the sale," Jason continued, "were deposited into a new account under the LLC's name. From there, most of it was transferred to accounts we're still tracking, but approximately $900,000 went toward the purchase of a beachfront condominium in Tampa, Florida. The property is titled solely in Eleanor Mitchell's name. My mother-in-law had used my grandmother's legacy to buy herself a beachfront retirement home. The bitter irony was almost too much to bear. What about the tenants? The people living at Parkview? I asked, thinking of the families who had made their homes there, including Eleanor herself. Bayview Development plans to convert the building to luxury condominiums. All tenants have been given 60-day notices to vacate, including Eleanor. She'd evicted herself without knowing it. But if I didn't sign those documents, if my signature was forged, then the sale isn't legal, I insisted. We can undo this. Jason's expression showed both admiration for my fighting spirit and regret that the situation wasn't so simple. We can challenge it? Absolutely. I've already initiated that process. But real estate fraud cases can be complex and time-consuming. In the meantime, the property has changed hands, and the money has been moved. What about Daniel's company? Megan mentioned rumors about financial problems, an audit. Jason nodded. My contacts in the Financial Crimes Division have confirmed that Meridian Marketing, Daniel's employer, is under investigation for financial irregularities. Specifically, client funds that were supposed to be held in escrow for advertising campaigns being misappropriated. The pieces continued falling into place, forming a picture more disturbing than I could have imagined. Daniel, stealing from his company, possibly facing criminal charges. Using my medical emergency as cover to clean out our accounts, sell off assets, and flee to Florida with his mother. He's been planning this for months, I said, the realization burning like acid in my throat. Using me, lying to me, setting everything up while I trusted him. Megan nodded grimly. The Henderson project files he took from the studio? I think he was trying to access your client payment information. The Henderson family paid their initial design fee to your business account, but they're about to release the main project funds, nearly $200,000. My business. Would there even be a business left when this was over? We need to protect what's left, I said, forcing myself to think practically through the crushing weight of betrayal. The Henderson payment, my client relationships, anything Daniel hasn't. Already stolen. Already in progress, Jason assured me. I've filed emergency petitions with the court for financial separation, freezing of assets, and a restraining order against both Daniel and Eleanor. I've also initiated fraud reports with all 3 credit bureaus to prevent any new accounts being opened in your name. He paused, glancing at his phone as a new message came in. His expression shifted subtly. What is it? I asked. The police just confirmed that Daniel's passport was used at Miami International Airport 3 hours ago, a ticket purchased to Grand Cayman, departing at 8:45 tonight. The Cayman Islands, known for banking privacy, limited extradition. Daniel was running, not just to Florida, but potentially out of reach of U.S. authorities entirely. And Eleanor? I asked. No international travel detected yet, but there's a ticket purchased in her name for a Tampa flight tomorrow morning. She was following him, but not all the way. Perhaps Eleanor didn't know the full extent of what Daniel had done, or perhaps she was just more confident they wouldn't face consequences. So what now? I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded despite the emotional earthquake reshaping my entire life. Now, Jason said, his tone shifting to something more determined. We fight back. I've coordinated with the fraud divisions at your banks and filed official police reports for identity theft and property fraud. I've also reached out to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, given the interstate nature of these activities. The FBI? The scope of this betrayal continued to expand beyond anything I could have imagined. Jason nodded. Daniel isn't just running from a failing marriage or financial disputes. Based on what we're uncovering, he's likely involved in significant financial crimes both at his company and now against you personally. This isn't just divorce territory anymore. A knock at the door interrupted us. A nurse entered, followed by a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Detective Warren from the Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, his voice professionally compassionate. I understand you're recovering from surgery, but I need to ask you some questions about your husband and mother-in-law. For the next hour, I answered his questions, going through every detail we'd uncovered. The detective took meticulous notes, occasionally asking Jason to elaborate on legal points. Based on what you've told me, Detective Warren said finally, we have enough to issue alerts for both Daniel and Eleanor Mitchell on suspicion of fraud, identity theft, and potential embezzlement from Meridian Marketing. The FBI has been notified regarding the interstate aspects and potential flight risk. He handed me his card. I'll be in touch as the investigation progresses. In the meantime, is there anything else you can think of that might help us locate either of them or trace the missing funds? I started to shake my head, then paused as a memory surfaced. Eleanor's phone. She has a terrible sense of direction and uses her phone for everything. Daniel set it up with some premium tracking app so he could always find her location if she got lost. Detective Warren raised an eyebrow. Do you know the name of the app or have access to it? It's called SafeTrack. Plus, Daniel made me download it too, said it was for emergency situations. I hadn't thought much about it at the time, seeing it as a reasonable precaution. Now I wondered if it had been another way for him to monitor me. I don't have access to Eleanor's location, but Daniel does. It's all linked to his main email account. Do you know his password? I shook my head. He changed all his passwords regularly, but a thought occurred to me. His laptop automatically saves them, if it's still at our house. I'll send officers to secure the premises and look for the laptop, Detective Warren said, already texting someone on his phone. After he left, I slumped back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over me. The physical toll of surgery combined with the emotional trauma had drained every ounce of my energy. You need to rest, Megan said, concern evident in her voice. This is too much for someone who just had major surgery. She was right, but how could I rest while my life was unraveling? While Daniel and Eleanor were actively fleeing with everything they'd stolen from me. Jason closed his laptop. We've done everything we can legally do today. The authorities are involved. Accounts are frozen. Alerts are in place. The next steps will take time. But the Henderson project, I protested weakly. The client payment. I've already spoken with Kevin at your bank, Megan assured me. We've set up a new secure business account in your name only. I'll contact the Henderson family tomorrow to update the payment information. They'd thought of everything. While I'd been sleeping, my friend and her brother had been working tirelessly to salvage what they could from the wreckage Daniel and Eleanor had created. Thank you, I whispered, tears finally spilling over. Both of you. Megan squeezed my hand. Get some sleep. I'll stay here tonight. As they dimmed the lights and settled in for the night, I closed my eyes, not expecting sleep to come. But my body's need for healing overrode my mind's chaos, and I drifted off. Dreams filled with spinning passport stamps, Florida condos, and the betrayed faces of the families who would soon be evicted from Parkview. I woke to sunlight streaming through the hospital window and the sound of hushed voices. Blinking away sleep, I saw Megan speaking with an unfamiliar woman in a crisp pantsuit. Good morning, Megan said, noticing I was awake. Sarah, this is Rachel Green from Evergreen Property Management, the company that managed Parkview. Rachel stepped forward, her expression professionally sympathetic. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so sorry about what's happened. We had no idea the property sale wasn't legitimate. How did you find out? I asked, pushing myself into a sitting position. Your attorney contacted us yesterday evening, Rachel explained. It was quite a shock. We'd been dealing with representatives from Bayview Development for weeks, all seemingly legitimate. All the paperwork appeared to be in order. The tenants, I said, thinking again of the families. They've been given eviction notices? Rachel nodded grimly. Bayview sent out 60-day notices immediately after the sale closed. We've been fielding calls from upset tenants all week. Including Eleanor, I realized. She would have received an eviction notice for the apartment she had no idea I owned, purchased with money stolen from me. What happens now? I asked. That's complicated, Rachel admitted. With the sale being challenged as fraudulent, everything's in limbo. Legally, we can't collect rent or manage the property until ownership is clarified. But practically, Megan interjected, the tenants need to know what's happening, especially with Bayview pressuring them to leave. Rachel nodded. Exactly. That's why I'm here. We need guidance on how to proceed. Despite everything, my surgery, the betrayal, the legal mess, I found myself concerned about the people who called Parkview home. They were innocent bystanders in this disaster. Tell them to stay put, I decided. Let them know the eviction. Notices are being challenged. Keep collecting rent, but hold it in escrow until the ownership issue is resolved. Rachel looked relieved. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. We've managed Parkview for over 15 years. Since your grandmother's time. The community there matters to us. And Eleanor Mitchell in Unit 7? I couldn't help asking. Has she contacted you about her notice? A flash of recognition crossed Rachel's face. Mrs. Mitchell in 7? Yes. Actually, she called yesterday quite upset. Said there must be some mistake, that she had an arrangement. Rachel hesitated. She mentioned her son owns the building. The audacity was breathtaking. Even as they fled with stolen money, they were still trying to maintain their lies. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Standard response. "That all?" Questions about the evictions should be directed to Bayview Development. Rachel's expression turned curious. "Is there something special about that tenant?" "You could say that," I replied, not ready to explain the full complicated truth. "If she contacts you again, please let me know immediately." Rachel promised she would, then left to handle the Parkview situation, leaving me with Megan and 1,000 swirling thoughts. "You're handling this remarkably well," Megan observed after Rachel left. Was I? Inside, I felt like I was falling apart, piece by piece. But what choice did I have? Falling apart wouldn't recover my money, save my business, or fix the legal nightmare Daniel had created. "I don't think it's really hit me yet," I admitted. "It feels like a terrible dream." Megan's phone buzzed with a text. She checked it, her expression brightening slightly. "Jason's on his way with news. He says it's promising." Promising. After days of devastating revelations, the word seemed foreign, almost suspicious. Dr. Patel arrived to check my progress before Jason could appear. She seemed pleased with my physical recovery, despite the circumstances. "The infection is responding well to treatment," she confirmed. "If your blood work continues to improve, we might be able to discharge you tomorrow." The thought of leaving the hospital brought a fresh wave of anxiety. Where would I go? The house I'd shared with Daniel was now a crime scene, filled with evidence of his betrayal. Most of my money was gone. My business was in jeopardy. "Don't worry about discharge plans yet," Dr. Patel assured me, noticing my expression. "One day at a time." After she left, Jason arrived looking more energized than he had the previous evening. "We've had several breaks in the case," he announced, without preamble. "First, the police found Daniel's laptop at your house. The digital forensics team is working on it now, but they've already discovered emails confirming the property fraud scheme." "That's good news, right?" I asked cautiously. "Very good. It establishes clear evidence of criminal intent." He opened his briefcase, pulling out a folder. "Second, the FBI was able to freeze the LLC account before the remaining funds from the property sale could be transferred. There's approximately $700,000 still secured." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Not all was lost. "What about Daniel? Has he been arrested?" Jason's expression turned grim. "That's the complication. He did board the flight to Grand Cayman last night. The FBI has been in contact with authorities there, but the legal process is complex. It may take time to bring him back." "And Eleanor?" "That's the other piece of news. The tracking app you mentioned? It worked. Police located her at a hotel near Tampa International Airport. She was taken into custody this morning. My mother-in-law arrested." The image was both satisfying and surreal. "Is she talking?" Megan asked. "Apparently quite a lot," Jason confirmed. "According to the detective, she's claiming she knew nothing about the forged documents or the company embezzlement. Says Daniel told her the money transfers were legitimate, part of a surprise retirement plan he'd been setting up for her." "Do they believe her?" I asked skeptically. Jason shrugged. "That's for the courts to decide, but her cooperation might help recover more assets. She's already signed consent forms for authorities to search the Tampa condo and access all her financial records." The door opened again and Detective Warren entered, looking pleased despite his obvious fatigue. "Mrs. Mitchell?" he greeted me. "We've had some significant developments overnight. I thought you'd want to hear them directly." He confirmed what Jason had already told me about Eleanor's arrest and Daniel's flight to Grand Cayman, then added new details. The forensic accountants working with your bank have managed to trace several of the larger transfers. It appears your husband was moving money through multiple accounts before consolidating funds for wire transfers to offshore accounts. How much? I asked, bracing myself. Of the approximately $214,000 taken from your joint accounts, we've located and frozen about $70,000 that was still in transit. The remainder had already moved offshore. Only about a third recovered. Still, it was something. What about my grandmother's property? I asked. The apartment building? That's more complicated, Detective Warren admitted. The sale itself is being challenged through civil courts as fraudulent. If successful, ownership would revert to you, but Bayview Development will likely fight it, claiming they were innocent. Purchasers. More legal battles, more time, more uncertainty. In the meantime, he continued, we've secured a court order preventing Bayview from taking any action regarding the property or its tenants until ownership is resolved. At least the families living there were temporarily protected. There's one other thing you should know, Detective Warren said, his tone shifting slightly. When we searched your home, we found documentation suggesting your husband had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. $3 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. The room went silent as the implication hung in the air. A life insurance policy I knew nothing about, taken out months before my emergency surgery. Are you suggesting... I couldn't bring myself to finish the question. Detective Warren chose his words carefully. We have no evidence of any attempt to harm you. Your medical emergency appears to be entirely natural, according to your doctors. But the timing of the policy, combined with the other financial preparations and his immediate flight after your hospitalization, raises questions we're obligated to investigate. Had Daniel been hoping I would die during surgery? Had my survival thrown off his plans, forcing him to accelerate his escape? The thought was so monstrous I couldn't fully process it. We'll continue investigating all aspects of this case, Detective Warren assured me. In the meantime, a protective order has been issued barring both Daniel and Eleanor Mitchell from contacting you or coming near you. After he left, I sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb this latest revelation. The man I had loved, lived with, built a life with, might have been disappointed that my emergency surgery had saved rather than ended my life. Sarah, Megan said gently, breaking into my thoughts. You don't have to process all of this right now. It's too much. She was right. My mind felt overloaded, unable to fully comprehend the depth of betrayal I was facing. Let's focus on practical next steps, Jason suggested, recognizing my overwhelmed state. Dr. Patel mentioned possible discharge tomorrow. Where would you feel comfortable staying? Not my house. Never again. She'll stay with me, Megan said firmly. I have plenty of room and my building has security. I nodded gratefully, relieved to have that decision made for me. Next, your business, Jason continued. Megan has already updated the Henderson payment information. Is there anything else immediate we need to address? My business, the one thing Daniel hadn't completely destroyed. I need my laptop and design tablets, client files. The Henderson presentation is scheduled for next week. I've already collected the backup drives from the studio, Megan assured me, and ordered a new laptop and tablet to be delivered today. We can restore everything. They had thought of everything while I was still struggling to process the basic facts of my new reality. Thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed by their support. A nurse appeared with my midday medication, temporarily halting our discussion. As I took the pills, a notification chimed on Jason's phone. It's from my contact at the FBI, he said, reading quickly. They've located one of Daniel's offshore accounts in the Caymans. They're working through legal channels to freeze it. Another small victory in this ongoing battle. How much? I asked. Approximately $400,000, he replied, nearly half of what had been stolen from my accounts and business. Combined with the frozen LLC funds from the property sale, we were making progress in recovering what Daniel and Eleanor had taken. But some losses couldn't be measured in dollars, trust, security, the future I thought I had, the husband I believed I knew. Those were gone forever, replaced by suspicion, betrayal, and a trail of criminal investigations. What happens when they catch Daniel? I asked, suddenly needing to understand the full picture. What charges will he face? Jason didn't sugarcoat it. Based on what we know so far, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, potential embezzlement from his company, conspiracy, and possibly insurance fraud related to the life policy. Multiple federal and state felonies. If convicted on all counts, he could face decades in prison. The father of Eleanor's precious son, facing decades in prison. I wondered if she had known the full extent of what she was participating in, or if Daniel had manipulated her as effectively as he had manipulated me. And Eleanor? That depends on what can be proven about her knowledge and participation, Jason explained. If she truly believed the money transfers were legitimate, she might face lesser charges, but the evidence on Daniel's laptop may clarify her level of involvement. I nodded, processing this information. Part of me wanted them both to face the harshest possible consequences for what they'd done. Another part felt empty, too drained, for vengeful thinking. There's one thing I don't understand, I said finally. Why did they move so quickly? If Daniel was already planning to run, why not wait until after I was discharged from the hospital? Why create such an obvious trail? Megan and Jason exchanged glances. The company audit, Megan suggested. If Meridian was closing in on Daniel's embezzlement, he might have felt he had no choice but to run immediately. Your hospitalization just provided convenient cover. Or, Jason added more hesitantly, the life insurance policy suggests a different plan entirely. Perhaps your emergency surgery was supposed to have a different outcome. The implication hung heavy in the air. Had Daniel been counting on my death? Had my survival forced him to improvise a messier escape plan? The thought was too horrific to dwell on. Instead, I focused on the practical reality before me. I was alive. I was recovering. I had support. And slowly, piece by piece, we were reclaiming what had been taken from me. What's our next step? I asked, choosing to look forward rather than dwell on the monstrous possibilities of what might have been. Rest and recovery for you, Jason said firmly. Legal proceedings and asset recovery for us. Detective Warren has requested a formal statement once you're discharged, but everything else can wait. A knock at the door interrupted us. A hospital staff member entered with a large flower arrangement. Delivery for Sarah Mitchell, she announced. Megan intercepted it before it could reach me, checking the card with suspicious eyes. It's from your design team, she said, relaxing slightly as she read. Get well soon. The studio isn't the same without you. We're handling everything until you're back. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. In the midst of this nightmare, there were still people who cared, whose loyalty wasn't an illusion. As Megan placed the flowers on the windowsill, sunlight streaming through the petals created a prism of colors across my hospital bed. For the first time since waking to discover Eleanor's betrayal, I felt something other than shock, anger, or fear. I felt determination. Daniel and Eleanor had taken much from me, but they hadn't taken everything. I still had my skills, my reputation, my business relationships. I still had true friends who had proven their loyalty during this crisis. And most importantly, I still had myself, the strength, resilience, and intelligence they had underestimated. My mother-in-law had emptied my bank accounts during my hospital stay, not knowing I was her landlord. She was now in custody, facing criminal charges, while her son fled the country like a fugitive. This wasn't the end of my story. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would rebuild, recover, and emerge stronger than before. "Are you ready to go home?" Dr. Patel asked, reviewing my chart one final time. 5 days after my emergency surgery, I was finally being discharged. The physical healing was progressing well, the infection under control, the surgical site closing properly. The emotional wounds were another matter entirely. Home. The word felt hollow now. The house I had shared with Daniel would never be home again. "I'm staying with Megan," I clarified, as a nurse helped me into the wheelchair that hospital policy required for discharge. Dr. Patel nodded sympathetically. "I've detailed your follow-up care instructions. Remember to take it easy for at least 2 more weeks. No heavy lifting, limited work hours, and continue your antibiotics until the prescription is finished." I promised to follow her instructions, though in truth, work was the only thing keeping me sane. The Henderson Project presentation had been postponed another week, giving me time to rebuild the materials Daniel had taken. Megan had set up a temporary workspace in her guest room, complete with a new laptop, tablet, and all my backed-up design files. "I've added contact information for a trauma counselor," Dr. Patel added, handing me the discharge papers. "Given everything you're going through, professional support might be helpful." The suggestion made sense. In less than a week, my entire life had imploded. My husband was a fugitive. My mother-in-law was in custody. My finances were in chaos. My home was a crime scene. My business was in recovery mode. And authorities were investigating whether my spouse had taken out life insurance, hoping I wouldn't survive surgery. "Thank you," I said sincerely, taking the papers. "For everything." In the hospital lobby, Megan waited with Kevin Wong, my financial advisor. He hadn't been part of my inner circle before this crisis, but had quickly proven himself invaluable, working overtime to trace funds, secure accounts, and advise Jason on financial recovery strategies. "Sarah," Kevin greeted me with professional warmth. "Good to see you up and about. We have some developments to discuss when you're settled." Developments. In the past week, that word had rarely brought good news. Still, I appreciated his directness. Everyone else had been walking on eggshells around me, as if I might shatter at the slightest pressure. "Let's get you home first," Megan suggested, taking control of the wheelchair from the nurse. "Kevin can brief us there." Home was now Megan's spacious downtown loft, its industrial chic aesthetic a stark contrast to the traditional suburban home I'd shared with Daniel. The open floor plan, exposed brick walls, and wall-to-wall windows overlooking the city skyline felt like another world entirely. A world where I wasn't Mrs. Daniel Mitchell, but simply Sarah, designer, survivor, rebuilder. Megan had transformed. Her guest room into a combination bedroom and office for me, a comfortable bed, plush with pillows and a weighted blanket, a sleek desk with dual monitors, fresh flowers on the nightstand. Small touches of care that brought tears to my eyes when I first saw them. After helping me settle on the living room sofa with pillows supporting my still tender abdomen, Megan brought tea while Kevin spread documents across the coffee table. "First, the status of asset recovery," he began. "All business. The FBI has successfully frozen Daniel's primary Cayman account containing approximately $400,000. Legal proceedings to return those funds will take time, but they're optimistic given the clear evidence of fraud." I nodded, taking a cautious sip of tea. "What about the property sale proceeds?" "The remaining $700,000 from the LLC account remains secured. The civil case challenging the fraudulent sale of Parkview Apartments has been filed, with an emergency hearing scheduled for next week." Kevin shuffled through his papers. Bayview Development is fighting it, of course, claiming they were innocent purchasers without knowledge of the fraud. Were they? I asked. Kevin's expression turned skeptical. The timing is suspicious. The property wasn't listed publicly. The sale happened extraordinarily quickly and at below market value. One theory the investigators are exploring is whether someone at Bayview knew the documents were questionable but rushed the deal through anyway. Another layer of potential conspiracy. How deep did this go? What about Eleanor? I asked, still struggling to use the word mother-in-law for the woman who had participated in this betrayal. She remains in custody, Kevin confirmed. The prosecutor has filed formal charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and receiving stolen property. Her bail hearing is tomorrow. The thought of Eleanor potentially being released sent a chill through me. Could she still access the condo in Tampa? Kevin shook his head. The property has been secured as evidence and potential proceeds of criminal activity. Even if she makes bail, she won't have access to it. Small comfort. The image of Eleanor, living in luxury on a Florida beach, purchased with my grandmother's legacy, had been burned into my mind. There's something else, Kevin continued, his tone shifting slightly. The forensic accountants examining Daniel's laptop have discovered evidence suggesting this wasn't his first fraudulent activity. What do you mean? There are emails dating back 3 years regarding property transactions in Arizona and Nevada. Properties purchased using business entities with questionable documentation, then quickly sold for cash. The pattern matches what he attempted with Parkview, but on a smaller scale. 3 years. We'd only been married 7. Had half our marriage been a lie? Had Daniel been planning and executing fraud schemes while I innocently built my design business, believing we were partners working toward a shared future? Were these connected to Meridian Marketing? I asked, thinking of the company embezzlement Detective Warren had mentioned. That's still being investigated, Kevin replied. But the timing corresponds with Daniel's employment there. The working theory is that he may have been diverting client funds to finance these property schemes. And Eleanor? Was she involved? In those earlier transactions? Kevin hesitated. Her name appears on some of the documentation, but establishing her knowledge and intent will be more difficult. She maintains that she trusted Daniel to handle financial matters and simply signed what he put in front of her. Just as I had done, I realized with a pang, how many documents had I signed over the years without thoroughly reviewing them, trusting that my husband had my best interests at heart. The FBI believes Daniel has been building toward this exit strategy for some time, Kevin continued. Your hospitalization may have accelerated his timeline, but the groundwork was already in place. The life insurance policy flashed in my mind. $3 million if I had died during surgery. Had that been the preferred outcome in his twisted plan? Sarah? Megan's voice broke through my dark thoughts. Maybe this is enough for today. You just got out of the hospital. Part of me wanted to agree, to retreat to the guest room and pull the covers over my head. But hiding wouldn't solve anything. Knowledge, however painful, was power in this situation. No, I need to understand everything, I insisted. What about my business? The Henderson presentation is next week. Your new business accounts are secured, Kevin assured me. The temporary line of credit has been approved to cover immediate expenses until client payments start coming in. Your business insurance policy also includes provisions for criminal fraud that we're working to activate. At least Mitchell Design Studio would survive, even if my marriage and personal finances had been demolished. What about day-to-day expenses? I asked, facing the practical realities of my situation. Most of my liquid assets are gone, or frozen pending investigation. That's why I wanted to meet today, Kevin said, pulling out another document. Your grandmother's foresight is proving even more valuable than we initially thought. He handed me a statement from Greenfield Bank, showing an account I didn't recognize with a balance of just over $42,000. What is this? A reserve account established under the property management agreement for Parkview Apartments, Kevin explained. Your grandmother set it up for emergency repairs and capital improvements. It's completely separate from the property ownership, tied to the management contract rather than the building itself. Daniel couldn't access it because he didn't know about the management arrangement. Another safety net I hadn't known existed. My grandmother's careful planning continued to protect me even years after her death. Since you're still the contracted management client, regardless of the disputed property ownership, these funds remain accessible to you, Kevin concluded. $42,000. Not enough to rebuild everything I'd lost, but enough to give me breathing room, to keep me from financial desperation while the legal process unfolded. Thank you for finding this, I said, fighting back tears. The emotional roller coaster of the past week had left me raw, tears constantly threatening at the slightest provocation. Just doing my job, Kevin replied modestly. We'll keep looking for any other accounts or assets that might have been overlooked. After Kevin left with promises to update us after Eleanor's bail hearing, I sank deeper into the sofa cushions, emotionally drained but clearer about the path forward. You need to rest, Megan insisted, taking away the documents and bringing me a light lunch. Doctor's orders, remember? I picked at the salad she'd prepared, my appetite still affected by medication and stress. How can I rest when there's so much to do? The Henderson presentation is under control, Megan interrupted firmly. The team is handling the revisions. All the material has been recovered from backups. You can review it tomorrow after you've had proper rest. She was right, of course. My body was still healing, the surgical site still tender. The emotional trauma had taken its own toll, leaving me exhausted in a way sleep alone couldn't fix. Just 1 hour, Megan bargained, seeing my reluctance. Lie down for 1 hour, then you can check emails if you're feeling up to it. I agreed, retreating to the guest room where the weighted blanket provided more comfort than I wanted to admit. Despite my racing thoughts, exhaustion won out, and I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke, the afternoon sun was setting, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar room. I'd slept for nearly 4 hours, longer than I had since before the surgery. My phone showed multiple missed calls and messages, from Jason, from clients, from well-meaning friends who had heard vague rumors about problems with Daniel. The most recent message was from Detective Warren. Eleanor Mitchell's bail hearing moved up to today at 3 p.m. Call me when you can. I checked the time. 5:42 p.m. The hearing would already be over. Heart racing, I called the detective. Mrs. Mitchell, he answered promptly. How are you? Feeling? Better, physically, I said, skipping the pleasantries. The bail hearing? What happened? Bail was denied, he reported, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Given the evidence from Daniel's laptop and her own inconsistent statements, the judge considered her a flight risk. Eleanor would remain in custody as the case proceeded. The relief I felt was immediate and profound. There's more, Detective Warren continued. Based on emails recovered from the laptop, we've identified a third party involved in the property scheme, a Martin Walsh at Bayview Development. The name meant nothing to me. Who is he? Vice President of Acquisitions, and it appears, a longtime friend of Daniel's from college. The emails suggest Walsh knew the Parkview documents were fraudulent, but pushed the sale through anyway, with an agreement to split additional profits once the property was redeveloped. Another betrayal, another conspiracy, another layer to this seemingly bottomless deception. We've obtained warrants for Walsh's financial records and devices, the detective added. His cooperation could significantly strengthen the case against Daniel when he's brought back from Grand Cayman. When, not if. The distinction gave me hope. Is there any progress on that front? I asked. The extradition request has been filed. These matters take time, but the evidence is substantial. The Cayman authorities are cooperating. After thanking the detective for the update, I sat on the edge of the bed, processing this new information. Eleanor denied bail. A Bayview executive implicated. Daniel's extradition in progress. The pieces were moving, justice slowly grinding forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "You up? There's someone here to see you." Curious, I made my way carefully to the living room, where Megan sat with a woman I vaguely recognized but couldn't immediately place. "Sarah," Megan said, standing to help me to the sofa. "This is Brenda Walsh. She wanted to speak with you directly." Walsh, the same last name as the Bayview executive Detective Warren had just mentioned. "You're Martin Walsh's." I trailed off, uncertain of the connection. "Wife," Brenda confirmed, her expression strained. "Soon-to-be ex-wife. That's why I'm here." She clutched her handbag nervously, knuckles white with tension. "When the FBI came to our house this morning with search warrants, I learned things about Martin I never knew. About his business dealings, about his connection to your husband." My husband. The term felt foreign now, disconnected from my reality. "Martin has been acting strangely for months," Brenda continued. "Secretive phone calls, unexplained cash deposits, talk of early retirement. When I questioned him, he said it was a business opportunity that would set us up for life." The parallels to my own situation were eerily similar. Another spouse kept in the dark while illegal schemes unfolded. After the FBI left, I found documents Martin had hidden in his home office. Plans for the Parkview redevelopment, projected profits in the millions. She opened her handbag, pulling out a thumb drive. "I made copies of everything. The FBI has the originals, but I thought you should have this too." I accepted the drive, unsure what to say. "Thank you, but why are you doing this?" Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "Because I know what it's like to have your life shattered by someone you trusted, to question every memory, wondering what was real and what was manipulation. The FBI agent mentioned your situation, hospitalized while they stole from you. I couldn't stop thinking about it." Her compassion, born from a parallel betrayal, touched me deeply. Two women, strangers united by the deception of the men they had married. "The plans on that drive," Brenda continued, "show they intended to convert Parkview into luxury condominiums selling for 3 times what they paid. The projected profit was over $5 million. $5 million. The figure stunned me. My grandmother's modest apartment building, providing affordable homes to working families, transformed into luxury condos benefiting fraudsters. Martin told me we were moving to Portugal next month," Brenda added bitterly. "Said he was accepting an international position with a development firm there. I see now it was just their escape plan." Portugal, known for its golden visa program, offering residency to property investors. Another carefully planned exit strategy. "Has Martin been arrested?" I asked. Brenda nodded. "This morning, he's claiming innocence, says Daniel misled him about the property ownership. But the emails on that drive tell a different story." After Brenda left, promising to stay in touch as both our cases progressed, Megan and I examined the contents of the thumb drive. The files confirmed everything Brenda had said. Detailed plans for luxury condominiums, marketing materials already in development, projected profits in the millions, and most damning of all, emails between Martin and Daniel explicitly acknowledging the fraudulent nature of the transaction. "This is incredible evidence," Megan said, scrolling through the documents. "Jason needs to see this immediately." I nodded, but my attention had caught on something else: the architectural renderings for the planned redevelopment. The design was striking, innovative, exactly the kind of project that would once have excited me professionally. In that moment, staring at plans that would have destroyed affordable housing for families, including Eleanor, a realization crystallized within me. This wasn't just about recovering what had been taken from me. It wasn't just about justice for Daniel and Eleanor and their conspirators. It was about something larger, about the kind of person I wanted to be in the aftermath of this betrayal. "Megan," I said slowly, an idea taking shape. "What if we don't just try to reverse the property? Sale? What if we think bigger?" She looked up from the emails, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" "Parkview needs renovations, real ones, not luxury conversions that would price out the current residents. What if Mitchell Design Studio took on the building as a project? Modernizing while maintaining affordability? Working with the tenants rather than evicting them?" The idea continued to unfold as I spoke, gaining momentum. We could incorporate green building practices, community spaces, maybe even add a few units with creative financing to keep it accessible. Megan studied me for a long moment. "That's thinking big, especially with everything else you're dealing with." "I know, but..." I struggled to articulate the feeling growing within me. All this destruction Daniel has caused, all this chaos and pain, what if I could create something positive from it? Not just rebuild my life, but build something better than what existed before? "A phoenix project," Megan said thoughtfully, "rising from the ashes." The metaphor felt right. Exactly, and the Henderson project could help fund it if we get that contract. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of genuine excitement. Not just determination to survive, but enthusiasm for creating something meaningful. "Well," Megan said with a slow smile, "if anyone can pull this off, it's you. But first, let's focus on the Henderson presentation and getting you fully recovered. One impossible thing at a time." She was right, of course. The idea was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious given my current circumstances. But having a vision beyond mere survival, beyond the legal battles and asset recovery, gave me something positive to focus on. A North Star guiding me through the darkness Daniel's betrayal had created. The next morning, Jason arrived with coffee and cautious optimism. After reviewing the files from Brenda Walsh, his assessment was straightforward. "This significantly strengthens our case for the fraudulent property transfer. Walsh's arrest and the evidence on this drive create multiple pressure points." "Meaning what, exactly?" I asked, careful not to get my hopes too high. "Meaning everyone involved has incentive to cooperate to save themselves. Walsh will likely testify against Daniel to reduce his own charges. Bayview Development, facing potential criminal liability through Walsh's actions, may be motivated to rescind the purchase rather than fight a protracted legal battle. The prospect of regaining ownership of Parkview sooner rather than later made my Phoenix project seem less like fantasy and more like possibility. In fact," Jason continued, checking his phone, "I just received an email from Bayview's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss mutually beneficial resolution options. That's legal speak for, we're looking for a way out of this mess." Hope, that delicate emotion I'd been afraid to embrace, began to take root. Not blind hope that everything would magically return to normal, that Sarah was gone forever, but realistic hope that I could build something meaningful from the wreckage Daniel had left behind. I had an idea. I told Jason, outlining my vision for Parkview's renovation. Financially ambitious, I know, especially now, but actually, Jason interrupted, it could be very strategic. If we negotiate Parkview's return as part of the fraud resolution, having a clear development plan demonstrates your legitimate ownership interest beyond financial compensation. The legal implications hadn't occurred to me. I'd been thinking from a design and community perspective. But Jason saw the strategic advantage immediately. "Can you put together some preliminary concepts?" he asked. "Nothing elaborate, just enough to show your intent for the property's future. It could be useful in negotiations with Bayview." Preliminary concepts. My designer brain immediately began cataloging possibilities, constraints, opportunities. For the first time since waking in the hospital to discover Eleanor's betrayal, I felt like myself again. Not just a victim, but a creator with agency and vision. I can have something by tomorrow, I promised, already mentally sketching layouts. Jason smiled. Don't overdo it. You're still recovering from surgery. This is helping me recover, I insisted, giving me purpose beyond just reacting to what Daniel has done. After Jason left to prepare for his meeting with Bayview's attorneys, I spent the morning sketching renovation concepts for Parkview on my tablet. Nothing elaborate, as Jason had suggested, but enough to convey my vision. Maintaining the building's character while modernizing systems, creating community spaces, improving energy efficiency, all without displacing current residents or increasing rents beyond inflation adjustments. The work absorbed me completely, hours passing unnoticed until Megan insisted I take a break for lunch and medication. You seem different today, she observed as we ate. More focused. I feel different, I admitted. Like I'm finally moving, from defense to offense, from reacting to creating. My phone buzzed with a call from Rachel Green at Evergreen Property Management. Mrs. Mitchell, I have some news you should hear directly, she said after greeting me. Eleanor Mitchell is attempting to contact tenants at Parkview. How? She's in custody. Apparently, she's been making calls from the detention facility. One of our tenants forwarded a voicemail asking them to write character reference letters for her bail appeal, claiming she's being framed by financial predators who want to evict everyone from Parkview. The audacity was breathtaking. Even behind bars, Eleanor was manipulating, lying, trying to position herself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. Has anyone responded? I asked. Not that we know of. Most tenants are understandably confused. Mrs. Cooper in Unit 3 called me directly, asking what's really happening with the building. Mrs. Cooper. I remembered her from my childhood visits to my grandmother, a retired schoolteacher who had lived at Parkview for decades. My grandmother had always spoken highly of her. What did you tell her? The truth. That ownership is in dispute due to fraudulent documents, but that the original owner's granddaughter is fighting to reclaim the property and has no plans for evictions. Hearing myself described as the original owner's granddaughter, rather than Daniel's wife, felt right somehow. My connection to Parkview predated my marriage. It would outlast its dissolution. Thank you for handling it so well, I told Rachel. Would it be possible to arrange a meeting with the tenants? They deserve to hear directly from me what's happening, and my intentions for the building. Rachel sounded relieved. I think that would be extremely helpful. The uncertainty has everyone on edge. When did you have in mind? As soon as possible, I decided. Tomorrow evening? After finalizing arrangements for a 7 p.m. meeting in Parkview's community room, I returned to my sketches with renewed purpose. These weren't just theoretical designs anymore. They were promises I would make directly to the people whose homes were at stake. Detective Warren called that afternoon with yet another development. Daniel had been located in Grand Cayman, detained. By local authorities pending the extradition hearing, the FBI had frozen additional accounts there containing nearly $300,000 more, bringing the total recovered funds to over $1 million so far. He didn't expect to be found so quickly, Detective Warren explained. Our financial crimes unit coordinated with international partners to expedite the process, given the clear evidence and the circumstances of your hospitalization. Daniel, in custody. Eleanor, denied bail. Martin Walsh, cooperating with prosecutors. The house of cards they had built was collapsing rapidly, each new development creating momentum for justice. But justice, I was learning, wasn't the same as healing. It wasn't the same as rebuilding. Both would take time, intention, and a clarity of purpose that was only beginning to emerge from the chaos of betrayal. That evening, reviewing my designs for Parkview while Megan prepared dinner, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The initial shock and victimhood had given way to something stronger. Not just resilience, but a determination to create meaning from this experience. Daniel and Eleanor had emptied my accounts, tried to steal my inheritance, and left me hospitalized and alone. They had calculated that I would be too weak, too devastated, too financially depleted to fight back effectively. It was the greatest miscalculation of their lives. The community room at Parkview Apartments was more crowded than I had anticipated. Nearly all 24 residents had gathered, their faces a mix of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, open hostility. I couldn't blame them. Their homes were at stake, caught in a legal battle they hadn't created and couldn't control. "Thank you all for coming," Rachel Green from Evergreen Property Management began, standing beside me at the front of the room. "As promised, this is Sarah Mitchell, granddaughter of Elizabeth Parker, the original owner of Parkview." I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the twinge of pain from my still healing incision. 10 days after emergency surgery, I was mobile but far from fully recovered. Jason had advised against this meeting, concerned about the stress. Megan had insisted on accompanying me, hovering protectively nearby. But this was something I needed to do myself. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know you've all received eviction notices from Bayview Development, and I'm sure you've heard rumors about what's happening with the building. I wanted to meet with you directly to explain the situation and my intentions going forward." Mrs. Cooper, the retired teacher from Unit 3, spoke first. "Are you really fighting to keep the building?" Eleanor Mitchell called several of us, saying, "We should support her against financial predators trying to force everyone out." The mention of Eleanor's name sent a cold wave through me, but I maintained my composure. "Yes, I am fighting to keep the building. The truth is that my grandmother left Parkview to me when she passed away 5 years ago. The property was fraudulently transferred and sold without my knowledge or consent while I was hospitalized for emergency surgery." Murmurs spread through the crowd as I continued. "Eleanor Mitchell, who lives in Unit 7, participated in this fraud along with my husband Daniel. They're both currently in custody facing criminal charges." The revelation that Eleanor was involved in the fraud scheme elicited gasps from several residents. They'd known her as a neighbor for 2 years, never suspecting her connection to the property's owner or her role in its fraudulent sale. "What about our homes?" asked a young woman holding a toddler. "We can't afford to move, especially with such short notice." "That's why I'm here," I assured her, moving to the easel where I'd mounted my preliminary renovation sketches. "If I'm successful in reclaiming ownership, and my legal team believes we have a very strong case, I have no intention of converting Parkview to luxury condominiums as Bayview planned." I unveiled the sketches, showing my vision for Parkview's future. "Instead, I want to renovate the building thoughtfully, updating systems, improving energy efficiency, adding some community amenities, but maintaining affordability and preventing displacement." For the next hour, I presented my plans, answered questions, and listened to residents' concerns and suggestions. Their input was invaluable, practical insights only long-term occupants could provide. Which areas flooded during heavy rains? Where the insulation was insufficient? Which community amenities would be most appreciated? As the meeting concluded, Mrs. Cooper approached me, her expression thoughtful. "You're very different from your mother-in-law," she observed. Eleanor always had an air of looking down on this place, like living here was beneath her somehow. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Eleanor never knew I owned the building. She had no idea her rent checks were ultimately coming to me. Mrs. Cooper's eyes widened. "Oh my, that explains why she was always so secretive about her connection to the owner. She implied she had special status here through family connections." Another piece of Eleanor's deception. Even among her neighbors, she couldn't resist creating false impressions of privilege and connection. "Is it true what they're saying?" Mrs. Cooper asked more quietly. "That they drained your accounts while you were having surgery?" I nodded, not trusting myself to elaborate without letting anger creep into my voice. Despicable, she declared, with the moral certainty of someone who had spent decades instilling values in young minds. Elizabeth would be proud of how you're handling this. She often spoke of her granddaughter, the designer who would create beautiful spaces that improve people's lives. Those were her exact words. Tears pricked at my eyes. I hadn't known my grandmother had spoken of me that way to others. The validation of my current path, coming indirectly from her through Mrs. Cooper's memory, felt like a blessing from beyond. By the time Megan drove me back to her loft, exhaustion had set in, but so had a renewed sense of purpose. The faces of the Parkview residents, the single mother worried about finding another affordable apartment, the elderly couple who had lived there for 30 years, the young professional working 3 jobs to put himself through graduate school. They weren't just abstract tenants anymore. They were people whose lives would be directly impacted by the outcome of this legal battle. "You did good tonight," Megan said as we pulled into her parking garage. "I could see them responding to your sincerity." "I just told them the truth," I replied. "They deserve that after all the uncertainty they've been through." "The truth, yes, but also a vision. You didn't just promise to fight the evictions. You showed them a better future for their home." Megan turned off the engine, giving me an appraising look. That's the Sarah I know, always seeing the possibility in spaces others overlook. The next morning brought a flurry of developments. Jason called early, his voice animated with cautious optimism. "The meeting with Bayview's attorneys went better than expected," he reported. "After reviewing the evidence from Martin Walsh's files and learning about the FBI involvement, they're eager to distance themselves from the fraud. They've offered to rescind the purchase and return the property in exchange for repayment of their initial investment minus damages." "That's wonderful news," I said, relief washing over me. "How soon could this happen?" "These things still take time, but we're talking weeks rather than months. There's more. The FBI has recovered additional funds from accounts Daniel established in Singapore. Combined with the frozen assets in the Caymans and what remains in the LLC account, we're approaching full financial recovery. Full financial recovery. The prospect seemed impossible just days ago when I'd awakened in the hospital to discover my accounts drained. "What about Daniel's extradition?" I asked, the last major piece of the puzzle. "The hearing is scheduled for next week. Given the evidence and the charges, the FBI expects it to be approved. Daniel could be back on U.S. soil facing charges within the month." After the call ended, I sat on Megan's balcony, sipping coffee and absorbing the rapidly evolving situation. The legal machinery was working, justice progressing with surprising speed. Yet a part of me still struggled to reconcile the Daniel I thought I knew with the calculating criminal who had orchestrated this elaborate betrayal. 7 years of marriage. Countless shared moments, holidays, vacations, quiet Sunday mornings, reading the paper together. Had it all been a performance? A long con leading to this final act of betrayal? Or had something changed along the way, corrupting what was once genuine? I might never know the full truth. Daniel might never offer a genuine explanation or show real remorse. Eleanor might continue blaming others, positioning herself as a victim rather than an accomplice. That uncertainty, I was learning, was part of the legacy of betrayal. Questions that might remain forever unanswered. My phone rang, interrupting these reflections. It was Amanda Henderson, my most important client. "Sarah!" she exclaimed when I answered. "I've been so worried. Megan told us you had emergency surgery, but I've been hearing disturbing rumors about Daniel and some financial improprieties. Are you all right?" I took a deep breath. The Henderson project presentation was scheduled for tomorrow. I wouldn't let Daniel's actions jeopardize this opportunity. "Amanda, I'm recovering well from surgery," I began carefully. "And yes, there's a difficult personal situation involving Daniel that I'm handling. but I want to assure you that Mitchell Design Studio is on solid ground. Our team is ready for tomorrow's presentation, and the renovation concepts we've developed for your property are some of our strongest work. There was a pause before Amanda responded. Sarah, we've worked together for 3 years. I trust your design vision implicitly, but I need to know if there are any complications that might affect the project. A fair question. The Henderson renovation was a $8 million project with tight timelines and high visibility. Amanda needed certainty, not complications. The only complication is that I'm still somewhat limited physically after surgery, I admitted. But Megan and the team have been extraordinary, and I've been fully engaged in developing the concepts. The financial situation is completely separate from the studio, and I've taken steps to ensure it remains that way. Another pause. All right then, we'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. And Sarah? Whatever's happening, I'm sorry you're going through it. The simple expression of sympathy nearly undid me. In the whirlwind of legal maneuvers, financial investigations, and property negotiations, there had been little space for the basics, human acknowledgement of pain. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. After the call, I turned my attention to final preparations for the Henderson presentation. The project involved transforming a historic downtown warehouse into mixed-use space, retail on the ground floor, creative offices above, with a rooftop restaurant offering panoramic city views. The challenge was balancing modern functionality with historic preservation, creating a space that honored the building's industrial past while serving contemporary needs. Megan arrived home from the studio mid-afternoon, carrying large presentation, boards, and a gleam of excitement in her eyes. Wait until you see the final renderings, she said, spreading the materials across her dining table. The team has outdone themselves. The renderings were indeed stunning. Detailed visualizations showing the transformed space with careful attention to both aesthetic impact and practical functionality. The material selections balanced industrial authenticity with modern comfort. The lighting design created atmosphere while honoring the building's architectural features. It's perfect, I said, genuinely impressed. Everything we discussed and more. There's one more element I wanted to run by you, Megan said, pulling out one final board. The team suggested incorporating this as a signature element in the main atrium. The rendering showed a dramatic sculptural light fixture composed of hundreds of delicate glass elements, creating an effect like captured light rippling through water. It was breathtaking and immediately familiar. That's based on my concept sketch from last year, I realized, recognizing the design I'd played with during a creative block on another project. Megan nodded. We found it in your idea file when gathering materials after. Everything happened. The team developed it specifically for the Henderson space. We're calling it Phoenix Rising. The name caught me off guard, so aligned with my own emerging sense of identity through this crisis. A design born from creative frustration, developed during personal devastation, now poised to become a centerpiece in my most important project to date. It's perfect, I said again, this time fighting back tears. The next day, the Henderson presentation exceeded all expectations. Despite my still healing body and the emotional weight of recent events, I found myself fully present in my element, guiding Amanda and her investors through our vision for their property. The Phoenix Rising light sculpture proved to be the emotional core of the presentation, the element that transformed a strong renovation concept into something truly special. This is exactly what we hoped for, Amanda declared as the presentation concluded. Sensitive to the building's history, but boldly forward-looking. When can you start? We left with a signed contract and a first payment already being processed to our new secure account. As Megan drove me back to her loft, a text came in from Jason. Bayview agreement finalized. Property return in process. Call when you can. One by one, the pieces were falling into place. The Henderson contract secured, Parkview returning to my ownership. Financial assets being recovered, Daniel facing extradition, Eleanor denied bail. Yet amid these victories, a question loomed. What kind of life did I want to build from the ashes of betrayal? Who was Sarah Mitchell beyond the identify of Daniel's wife, beyond the victim of Eleanor's schemes? These questions occupied my thoughts as I recovered, gradually increasing my time at the studio, developing detailed plans for both the Henderson project and the Parkview renovations. Jason secured court approval to use some of the recovered funds for the Parkview improvements, arguing successfully that this would restore value to an asset that had been damaged by the fraudulent sale. 3 weeks after my discharge from the hospital, Detective Warren called with news. Daniel's extradition had been approved. He would be returned to the United States within days to face multiple federal charges. Would you like to be notified? When he arrives, the detective asked. Some victims find it helpful for closure. Victim. The word still felt uncomfortable, ill-fitting. Yes, I decided. I would like to know. 2 days later, the notification came. Daniel was in federal custody in Miami, awaiting transfer to Oakwood Valley. According to Detective Warren, he had said little since his detention, maintaining that Eleanor had acted without his knowledge and that he had left the country for a previously planned business opportunity. The lies continued, it seemed, even when the truth was documented in his own emails. That evening, I received another call, this one unexpected. Mrs. Mitchell? An unfamiliar voice asked. This is Carol Winters, Eleanor Mitchell's court-appointed attorney. My client has requested a meeting with you. The request caught me completely off guard. Why would she want to meet with me? She claims to have information about additional assets you may not be aware of. Information she's willing to share in exchange for your support at her sentencing hearing. Another manipulation, another scheme. Yet curiosity stirred beneath my skepticism. What assets might still be hidden? What game was Eleanor playing now? I'll need to consult with my attorney, I replied carefully. Jason was unequivocal. It's a bad idea. Any meeting would be on record and could be used to support her claims of cooperation without providing anything of real value. But if there are additional assets we haven't located, the financial forensics team is being very thorough, Jason countered. If anything exists, they'll find it through proper channels without giving Eleanor leverage or a platform. Logically, I knew he was right. Yet something in me wanted this confrontation, wanted to look Eleanor in the eye, to understand how my mother-in-law could have betrayed me so completely while I lay in a hospital bed fighting infection after emergency surgery. What if we agree to a monitored meeting? I suggested. With you present and clear conditions that no promises or deals are being offered? Jason frowned but eventually relented, recognizing my need for this exchange. I'll arrange it, but with strict parameters. The first sign of manipulation or deception, we walk away. The meeting was set for the following Monday at the detention facility where Eleanor awaited trial. The weekend passed in a blur of work, finalizing contractors for the Henderson project, reviewing applications for the additional designers we needed to hire, and developing detailed renovation plans for Parkview. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What would Eleanor look like after weeks in detention? What could she possibly say to justify what she had done? Jason met me outside the facility, his expression serious. Remember, you don't owe her anything. Your presence alone is more than she deserves. The visiting room was stark, a simple table, bolted to the floor, with chairs on either side. Eleanor entered escorted by a guard, her normally perfect appearance significantly diminished by the detention uniform and lack of hairstyling products. Without her carefully maintained facade, she looked older, smaller somehow. Her eyes widened, slightly at the sight of me. Perhaps surprised I had actually come, or perhaps noting my recovery. The guard instructed her to sit, then took up position by the door. "Sarah," she began, her voice carrying that familiar note of assumed authority despite her circumstances. "Thank you for coming." I said nothing, waiting. This meeting was her request. Let her reveal her purpose. "I'm sure you have." She hesitated, seeming to search for the right word. "Feelings about what's happened. But there are things you don't understand. Things Daniel didn't tell you, or me." "Such as?" I kept my voice neutral, refusing to be drawn into emotional engagement. Daniel was in trouble. Financial trouble, bad investments, gambling debts. She leaned forward slightly. "He told me he needed to access your accounts temporarily to resolve these issues. He promised everything would be replaced before you even noticed." The narrative was so transparently self-serving, it would have been laughable if not for the breathtaking audacity behind it. "Eleanor," I said evenly, "the FBI has Daniel's emails explicitly detailing your joint plans. They have the fraudulent property documents. They have records of the life insurance policy he took out without my knowledge. They have transfer records showing systematic movement of funds while I was in surgery." Her expression flickered, but she pressed on. "I was manipulated. You know how persuasive Daniel can be. I trusted my son." "Stop!" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "I didn't come here to listen to lies. You mentioned information about additional assets. That's the only reason I agreed to this meeting." Eleanor's demeanor shifted, calculation replacing pretended maternal concern. "There's a storage unit in Tampa. Unit 247 at Secure Storage on Palmetto Street. The key is hidden in a magnetic box under the back bumper of Daniel's car, which should still be in your garage." "What's in the storage unit?" "Items from your house, jewelry, artwork, some financial documents. Things Daniel thought might have value or sentimental importance." "Things they had stolen from me," she meant. "My possessions they had planned to retrieve once safely established in Florida." "Is that all?" I asked, preparing to leave. "There's more," Eleanor said quickly, sensing my withdrawal. "Offshore accounts Daniel didn't access from his laptop. Accounts the FBI hasn't found." Now we reached the heart of it, the bargaining. Chip, she believed, would secure my support at her sentencing. "Where are these accounts?" "I'll provide that information if you agree to speak at my sentencing hearing. Tell them I cooperated, that I was coerced by Daniel." I studied her face. The face of the woman who had never accepted me, who had undermined me throughout my marriage, who had participated in stealing my inheritance while I fought for my life in a hospital bed. Now she wanted my help to minimize her consequences. "Here's what's going to happen, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'm going to tell Detective Warren about the storage unit. If it exists and contains my stolen property as you've claimed, that information will be provided to the prosecutor and judge. If you have information about additional offshore accounts, I suggest you provide it directly to the FBI without conditions." Her face hardened. "You were never good enough for him, you know. Daniel deserved someone from a better family, someone who understood our world." The attack was so predictable, so aligned with her consistent pattern of belittlement, that it had no power to wound me. This woman's opinion of my worth no longer mattered, if it ever truly had. "Our world, Eleanor, is about to become very small for both you and Daniel. Prison cells typically are." I stood, signaling to Jason that the meeting was concluded. "For what it's worth, I hope you find some measure of truth and accountability during your time there. It's the only path to actual redemption." Her face contorted with anger, but I was already turning away, done with her manipulations, her lies, her toxic presence in my life. Outside in the clear autumn air, I took a deep breath, feeling as though a weight had been lifted. The confrontation I had both dreaded and needed was complete, and Eleanor held no more power over me. No power to hurt, to manipulate, to diminish. "You handled that perfectly," Jason said as we walked to his car. "Should we notify Detective Warren about the storage unit?" "Yes, though I doubt anything of real value is there. It was just a carrot to get me to this meeting." I gazed at the detention facility behind us, a concrete and steel manifestation of consequences finally being faced. The offshore accounts are probably fictional too. One last desperate attempt at leverage. As predicted, the storage unit did exist, but contained only a few minor items from our house. Some framed photos, winter clothes, household decorations. Nothing of significant financial or sentimental value. No documents revealing hidden accounts. Just another small deception in Eleanor's pattern of manipulations. Daniel's arraignment the following week was a media event, with local news covering the story of the marketing executive who had allegedly defrauded his own wife while she was hospitalized, attempted to steal her inheritance, and then fled the country. I declined to attend, focusing instead on the Henderson Project kickoff and Parkview renovation plans. 6 weeks after my emergency surgery, life had established a new rhythm. I had moved from Megan's loft into a rented downtown apartment. Simple but elegant, with large windows overlooking the city park. Mitchell Design Studio was thriving, with the Henderson project progressing ahead of schedule and new clients attracted by our innovative work. The Parkview renovations were underway, with residents actively involved in the process, creating a true community revitalization rather than mere physical improvements. I was healing, physically, emotionally, professionally. The surgical scar was fading. The sense of betrayal, while never completely erasable, had lost its sharp edge of pain. My business was stronger than ever, my creative vision clearer, my purpose more defined. Daniel and Eleanor had emptied my accounts during my hospital stay, never realizing I was Eleanor's landlord. They had miscalculated monumentally, underestimating my resilience, my resources, my resolve. Their betrayal, meant to destroy me, had instead catalyzed a transformation they could never have foreseen. As I reviewed the latest renderings for the Parkview community space, featuring natural light, flexible gathering areas, and elements designed with input from the residents themselves, I realized that this, creating beauty and functionality from challenging circumstances, had always been my strength as a designer. Now I was applying that same skill to redesigning my own life, creating something stronger and more authentic from the broken pieces Daniel and Eleanor had left behind. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Phoenix Rising installation just arrived for Henderson Building. It's spectacular. Coming to see it?" I smiled, gathering my things. The symbolism couldn't be more perfect. Beauty emerging from destruction, light created from darkness, new life rising from what had been reduced to ashes. My mother-in-law had emptied my bank accounts during my hospital stay. She had no idea I was her landlord. But more importantly, neither she nor Daniel had any idea who I truly was, the strength I possessed, the vision I could manifest, the life I would create from their betrayal. That was their final, most consequential miscalculation. 1 year after my emergency appendectomy, I stood in the newly renovated community room at Parkview Apartments, surrounded by residents, contractors, and local press. Sunlight streamed through the energy-efficient windows we'd installed, illuminating the space that had become the heart of this revitalized community. And so, it gives me great pleasure to officially reopen Parkview Commons, I announced, cutting the ceremonial ribbon to enthusiastic applause. The name change had been the residents' idea, a symbol of the building's transformation from mere apartment units to a true community. Mrs. Cooper, now head of the Resident Advisory Board, stepped forward. "On behalf of everyone who calls this place home, we want to thank Sarah Mitchell for not just saving our homes, but making them better than ever." She presented me with a handmade quilt, each square created by a different household. Every Family contributed to this, just as you've invited every family to contribute to Parkview's new chapter. The moment was sweetly triumphant. The 6-month renovation had maintained the building's historic character while modernizing systems, improving energy efficiency, adding community spaces, and even creating 2 additional affordable units where storage areas had previously been underutilized. Most importantly, not a single resident had been displaced. Megan squeezed my arm as reporters began asking questions about the project. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered. She was right. This renovation honored my grandmother's legacy far better than simply preserving the building as it had been. Elizabeth Parker had always believed in practical improvements and community investment. She would have approved wholeheartedly of Parkview Commons. After the ceremony, Rachel Green from Evergreen Property Management approached with a thin folder. "The final accounting for the renovation," she said. "We came in just under budget." The renovation had been funded through a combination of recovered funds from Daniel's fraud, grants for affordable housing preservation, and energy efficiency incentives. The financial structure we'd created ensured Parkview would remain affordable for decades to come, while generating enough revenue for ongoing maintenance and improvements. "And this arrived yesterday," Rachel added, handing me an envelope with the detention facility's return address. Eleanor. My former mother-in-law had been writing regularly since our meeting 6 months ago, letters I had consistently returned, unopened. This one, however, bore an official stamp. Final communication, address change notice. Curious, I opened it. "Sarah," Eleanor had written in her precise handwriting, "I am being transferred to the Federal Women's Facility next week to begin serving my 12-year sentence. Daniel received 28 years at his sentencing yesterday. You did not attend either hearing. Which is your right? I am writing one last time to say what needs to be said. You won. Completely. The offshore accounts I mentioned were indeed fabricated. A final, desperate attempt at leverage. There is nothing left hidden, nothing more to recover. The investigators were thorough. You have prevailed in every possible way." The letter continued with what appeared to be genuine reflection. "In my considerable time alone, I have been forced to acknowledge that my animosity toward you was never about you at all. You represented a world where women like you, independent, successful on your own terms, no longer needed to secure your position through strategic marriages and family connections as I had done. Your existence challenged everything I had sacrificed for and believed in. It was easier to diminish you than to question my own choices." I folded the letter, tucking it into my jacket pocket. Eleanor's belated insights meant little to me now. Whether she had achieved genuine self-awareness or was simply crafting another manipulation made no difference to my life moving forward. Her chapter in my story was closed. "Everything okay?" Megan asked, noticing my expression. "Yes," I said, genuinely meaning it. Just the past making a final appearance before fully giving way to the future. That future had taken clear shape in recent months. Mitchell Design Studio had doubled in size, with the spectacular success of the Henderson project leading to multiple high-profile commissions. We'd moved to larger offices in the Arts District, where my team of talented designers tackled projects ranging from boutique retail spaces to community-centered developments similar to Parkview. The philosophy guiding my work had evolved too. While I still created beautiful spaces for wealthy clients, I had established the Parker Foundation, named for my grandmother, which dedicated a percentage of the studio's profits to affordable housing preservation and community-centered design. The foundation had already partnered with 2 other at-risk apartment buildings in Oakwood Valley, helping resident associations purchase their buildings and implement sustainable renovation plans. Professionally, I had never been more successful or fulfilled. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead crystallized my purpose, clarifying what truly mattered in my work and life. Personally, healing had come more gradually. Trust didn't come easily after such profound deception. Dating felt foreign, almost impossible at first. How could I believe in anyone's sincerity when the man I had shared 7 years with had been plotting against me, potentially even hoping for my death? The trauma counselor Dr. Patel had recommended helped me work through these fears. "What happened to you was extraordinary," she reminded me often. "Most people aren't capable of such calculated betrayal. By assuming everyone will betray you, like Daniel did, you give him ongoing power over your life." Slowly, I had rebuilt my capacity for trust, first with established friends like Megan, then with new acquaintances who demonstrated consistency and integrity over time. I had even begun dating recently, cautiously allowing someone new into my life. Mark was an architect I'd collaborated with on the Henderson project, straightforward, transparent, and patient with my careful pace. "Ready to head to the reception?" Megan asked, bringing me back to the present moment. The neighborhood association was hosting a celebration at the local community center, honoring Parkview Commons as a model for affordable housing preservation. It represented everything I believed in professionally: functional, beautiful design that improved lives rather than just impressing visitors. "Absolutely," I replied, taking one last look around the community room where my journey of recovery had truly begun when I'd met with anxious residents to share my vision for their homes. As we walked the 3 blocks to the community center, residents stopped to thank me along the way. Mr. Jimenez from Unit 12 proudly showed me photos of the tomatoes growing in the new rooftop garden. The Rodriguez children excitedly described the mural they were creating for the playground area, with help from a local artist. Ms. Taylor, who had initially been the most skeptical about the renovation, invited me to see her beautiful new kitchen, windows that catch the morning light perfectly. These small interactions meant more to me than any architectural award or magazine feature ever could. They represented real impact on real lives, the ultimate validation of the path I'd chosen. The community center was already buzzing with activity when we arrived. Local officials mingled with residents and members of the press. A display of before and after photographs documented Parkview's transformation, while architectural renderings showed future plans for the surrounding neighborhood, inspired by our project's success. Amanda Henderson approached immediately, champagne flutes in hand. "The woman of the hour. I've been singing your praises to everyone who'll listen." The Henderson project had been completed 4 months earlier to widespread acclaim, putting Mitchell Design Studio firmly on the map for innovative adaptive reuse designs. The Phoenix Rising light sculpture had become something of a local landmark, featured in architectural journals and drawing visitors specifically to see its dramatic effect. "Sarah!" Jason called, making his way through the crowd with Kevin Wong beside him. "Sorry we're late. Court ran long." "Good news, I hope?" I asked. Jason's smile was answer enough. The final settlement was approved. Every legal proceeding related to the fraud case is officially closed as of this afternoon. Kevin added, "The last of the recovered funds, approximately $215,000 from Daniel's hidden Singapore account, has been released from the court's control. I've already initiated the transfer to your primary account." The total financial recovery had been impressive, nearly $7 million between the frozen accounts, property restitution, and settlements from Bayview Development and Martin Walsh. It wasn't everything that had been taken, but it was far more than most fraud victims ever recovered. Yet the money itself no longer felt like the most important outcome. What mattered more was the purpose I'd found for those funds through the Parker Foundation and Parkview Commons. "Perfect timing," I said, raising my glass. "A true closing chapter." "How does it feel?" Jason asked quietly, after Kevin had moved away to speak with another client. "To have it officially over?" I considered the question carefully. "Less cathartic than I expected," I admitted. "The legal resolution matters, of course, but the real closure happened when I realized I was no longer defining myself by what had been done to me." Jason nodded thoughtfully. That's the difference between justice and healing. They're related but distinct processes. Exactly. The justice system handled Daniel and Eleanor. But rebuilding my life, that was work only. I could do. I gestured around at the celebration. And this is what I chose to build. Jason raised his glass in silent toast, understanding the journey I'd made from victim to creator. We'd developed a genuine friendship over these months of legal battles, his initial professional concern evolving into respect, and now warm collegiality. There's something else you should know, he said. Daniel has filed an appeal on his conviction. The news didn't surprise me. Daniel would never accept responsibility or consequences if there was any possibility of escape or manipulation. Will it succeed? I asked. Highly unlikely. The evidence is overwhelming, and his flight to the Caymans didn't help his credibility with the court. But I wanted you to hear it from me, not see it in the news. I appreciated his thoughtfulness. Thank you. But honestly, Daniel's legal maneuvers don't affect me anymore. He exists in a separate universe now. As the celebration continued, the mayor of Oakwood Valley approached with the city planning director. Ms. Mitchell, the transformation you've achieved here is remarkable. We'd like to discuss involving the Parker Foundation in the West Side Revitalization Initiative. The West Side District was a historically working-class neighborhood facing intense gentrification pressure as developers bought up older properties. 4 small apartment buildings there were at risk of conversion to luxury units, potentially displacing dozens of families. I'd be very interested in that conversation, I replied, already mentally sketching possibilities. Preserving existing. Affordable housing is exactly what the foundation was created to support. The planning director nodded enthusiastically. What you've accomplished at Parkview, improving quality while maintaining affordability, is precisely the model we want to encourage. The council has set aside matching funds for preservation projects, but we need partners with your expertise and vision. The architectural challenges would be significant, I noted, thinking of the pre-war buildings in that neighborhood. But that often creates the most interesting design opportunities. I'd love to tour the properties next week. Excellent. I'll have my assistant arrange it, the mayor replied, clearly pleased. The current owners are considering offers from several developers, but they've given the city a short window to present preservation alternatives. Community input would be essential, I added. Involving current residents from the beginning creates better outcomes for everyone. The planning director looked impressed. That was exactly our thinking. Your approach with Parkview, making residents partners rather than passive recipients, that's what distinguished this project from typical renovations. Another challenge, another opportunity to create something meaningful from difficult circumstances. The rhythm of my new life was becoming clear. Identify vulnerable communities, develop practical preservation strategies, implement thoughtful improvements that honored existing residents while securing long-term affordability. Mark arrived as I was finishing my conversation with the city officials. He'd been overseeing final details on another project and had come directly from the site, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up after a long day. Sorry I'm late, he said, kissing my cheek. The contractor had questions about the structural supports for the rooftop garden. Our relationship had developed slowly over the past 5 months, beginning with professional collaboration on the Henderson project and gradually evolving into something more personal. Mark understood the weight of betrayal I carried. Never. Pushing for more trust than I was ready to give, demonstrating his reliability through consistent actions rather than grand promises. You're just in time, I assured him. The mayor was discussing the West Side Revitalization Initiative. Your firm might be interested in the architectural challenges there. Mark's eyes lit up with professional excitement. The pre-war buildings on Elm Street? Those have incredible potential with the right approach. The load-bearing elements are remarkably sound despite their age. As he chatted with the planning director about architectural considerations, I found myself studying his animated expression, the genuine enthusiasm he brought to preservation work rather than showy new construction. Another man might have seen the West Side buildings as teardowns, opportunities for profitable redevelopment. Mark saw their character, their history, their continued potential to serve communities. The contrast with Daniel couldn't have been more stark. Where my ex-husband had viewed properties as commodities to exploit for maximum personal gain, Mark saw them as living spaces with social value beyond their market price. Where Daniel had cultivated calculated charm, Mark offered straightforward integrity. Where Daniel had presented a carefully manufactured image, Mark simply was himself, sometimes rumpled, occasionally working too late, consistently authentic. "You're staring," Megan whispered, appearing at my side with fresh drinks. "Just thinking." "About contrasts," I admitted, "and choices. Good choices from where I'm standing." She nodded toward Mark, who was now sketching something on a napkin for the planning director. "He looks at you the way someone looks at a sunrise." The observation made me blush. "We're taking it slowly." "As you should," she agreed. "But it's nice to see you open to possibilities again. A year ago, I wasn't sure you'd ever trust anyone new." "A year ago, I was barely functional," I reminded her, remembering those first devastating days after discovering Eleanor's betrayal. "You pretty much ran my life while I tried to process what was happening." "That's what friends do," she replied simply. "You'd have done the same for me." Our friendship had deepened through the crisis, evolving from business partners with shared interests to something more like family. Megan had seen me at my lowest, most vulnerable point, and had never wavered in her support. That kind of loyalty couldn't be manufactured or performed. It was either present or absent in times of true need. Mrs. Cooper joined us, pride evident in her bearing as other community organizers sought her advice about resident-led initiatives. "Sarah, I've been meaning to ask, did you ever hear back from that reporter who wanted to do the feature story on Parkview Commons?" "Yes, they're coming next week for interviews. They want to focus on the community participation aspects of the renovation." The national magazine coverage would bring attention to our model of affordable housing preservation, potentially inspiring similar projects elsewhere. Wonderful. Several residents have stories they're eager to share about the process. Mrs. Cooper had become a powerful advocate for tenant rights beyond Parkview, speaking at city council meetings and advising other buildings facing redevelopment pressure. "Oh, and before I forget," she continued, "we found something during the final attic cleanout that I think belongs to your grandmother." She handed me a small, weathered leather book. Opening it, I recognized my grandmother's handwriting immediately. It was another journal, earlier than the one I'd been reading, dating back to when she first purchased Parkview nearly 40 years ago. "Thank you," I said, deeply touched. "This is a treasure." As the evening progressed, I found myself observing the celebration from a slight distance, taking in the scene with a sense of quiet accomplishment. City officials chatting with residents, as equals rather than constituents. My design team discussing future possibilities with community organizers. Mark and Jason deep in conversation about affordable housing policy, both passionate about creating systemic change. This gathering represented everything I now valued: community connection, practical innovation, authentic relationships built on mutual respect. None of it would have existed without the crisis that had destroyed my former life. Eleanor's letter rustled in my pocket, a reminder of how completely my world had been upended just 1 year ago. I had awakened in a hospital bed to discover my accounts emptied, my husband fled, my mother-in-law's betrayal. In those first devastating days, simply surviving had seemed an almost insurmountable challenge. Yet here I stood, not just having survived, but having created something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. The path hadn't been easy. There had been days of overwhelming anger, nights of paralyzing fear, moments of doubt about whether justice would ever be served. The legal battles had been exhausting, the financial recovery complex, the emotional healing a daily practice rather than a singular achievement. But standing in this room full of people united by a shared vision for community preservation, I felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where I belonged, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people of integrity who valued creation over exploitation. Later that night, back in my downtown apartment with its panoramic city views, I opened my grandmother's newly discovered journal, eager to understand more about her initial vision for Parkview. The first entry described her purchase decision. Bought the apartment building on Oak Street today. The bank manager questioned whether a woman alone could manage such a property. I refrained from pointing out that women alone have been managing households, businesses, and entire communities since time immemorial, often without recognition or support. Instead, I showed him my impeccable credit record and substantial down payment. Amazing how financial independence clarifies one's position in negotiations. I smiled, recognizing the practical wisdom that had saved me during my own crisis. My grandmother had understood what truly mattered, not just the property itself, but the financial independence it represented, the options it created, the security it provided. Further entries revealed her growing connection to the building's residents, her careful stewardship of the property, her philosophy of modest improvements over time rather than flashy renovations that would necessitate higher rents. She wrote of refusing multiple lucrative offers from developers, even when friends advised her to cash out during real estate booms. Property is not merely an investment vehicle, she had written. It is shelter, community, home. The families at Parkview deserve stability in an increasingly unstable world. Their children should know their school friends through graduation, not just until the next rent increase forces another move. Their elders should age in familiar surroundings, not be priced out of neighborhoods they helped build. This is not charity. It is recognition of our shared humanity and interconnected well-being. The words resonated deeply with the path I had chosen, confirming that the Parker Foundation wasn't just a response to trauma, but a continuation of a legacy I hadn't fully understood until now. My grandmother had been practicing community-centered property ownership decades before it became a recognized approach to fighting displacement and gentrification. I continued reading, finding an entry that particularly struck me. Eleanor Mitchell inquired about an apartment today, Unit 7, recently vacated. Impeccably dressed, clearly from money, though her references suggest recent financial adjustments. Something calculated in her manner, as if she's constantly assessing value and advantage in every interaction. I hesitated but ultimately approved. Her application. Everyone deserves housing, regardless of whether I would choose them as a friend. Still, I'll instruct the management company to monitor the situation closely. I nearly dropped the journal in shock. Eleanor had lived at Parkview before? This entry was dated 35 years ago, long before I was born, before Eleanor had married Daniel's father. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet there it was, in my grandmother's neat handwriting. I turned the page, finding more. Eleanor Mitchell moved out after just 6 months. No notice, rent left unpaid. Management found the unit in poor condition, with damage beyond normal wear. I've instructed them to withhold her security deposit, though it won't cover all repairs. Some people view rental agreements as suggestions, rather than commitments, a disappointing but not unexpected outcome. The revelation was startling. Eleanor had lived at Parkview decades before, leaving under circumstances that reflected the same disregard for others and contractual obligations she had demonstrated in our recent interactions. And then, by strange coincidence or unconscious pattern, she had returned to the same building years later, never knowing her previous landlord's granddaughter had become her daughter-in-law and current property owner. The circular nature of this connection felt meaningful somehow, as if Eleanor's character had been consistent across decades, while my grandmother's values had silently influenced my own evolution even before I fully understood them. I closed the journal, feeling a renewed connection to my grandmother and the values she had quietly modeled. The financial inheritance she had left me had indeed saved me during crisis, but her example of purposeful living was proving equally valuable in rebuilding my life. My phone chimed with a text from Mark. Just got home? Today was special. Your vision for Parkview has inspired so many, including me. Breakfast tomorrow before the West Side tour? I smiled, typing back my agreement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new possibilities, new opportunities to create beauty and function in spaces others had overlooked or exploited. The work ahead was substantial, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely aligned with my purpose. My mother-in-law had emptied my bank accounts during my hospital stay. She had no idea I was her landlord. But the greatest revelation wasn't the irony of that situation. It was discovering who I truly was beyond the roles of wife, daughter-in-law, victim, or even business owner. I was a builder of communities, a creator of spaces where people could thrive, a caretaker of my grandmother's legacy reimagined for a new era. As I turned away from the window, I caught sight of my reflection, confident, purposeful, at peace. The woman looking back at me had been forged in betrayal's fire but had emerged not just intact, but transformed, stronger, wiser, more authentic and intentional than ever before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new communities, to preserve and strengthen. I was ready for all of it, not despite what I had endured, but because of it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.